Rachel Carson, Her Story Continues, done by Christopher Cogdell, for Community and Public Health, instructor Wanda Carter. Rachel Carson, the person. She was born in the Northeast from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on May 27, 1907. She was the youngest of three, and after she was born, her mother Maria quit teaching and devoted her time to bringing up Rachel and her brother and sister. Maria decided to teach her children through school, up until high school, since their father was gone most of the time for work. Rachel's love for writing and nature came from her mother making sure she had these values instilled in her as a little girl. Maria had Rachel submit her writings to St. Nicholas magazine. This is where Rachel won her first publishing prize at the age of 11. Rachel continued to do great in school, as she won a scholarship to the Pennsylvania College for Women, now called Chatham University. The climate around Rachel when she was doing most of her work from 1930s to the 1960s. Most of Rachel's life, America was going through some of the biggest changes and challenges that it has ever faced. She had to stop pursuing her master's because of the lack of funding during the Great Depression in 1934. Even through the Great Depression, Rachel was still able to find work as a part-time writer for the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries. Rachel worked through the Bureau for many years and continued to progress and make bigger contributions to biology. Through the 40s and World War II, Rachel continued to work with the government. Now it was called Fish and Wildlife Services. Her first book, Under the Sea Wind, was affected by World War II and was put out of print because supplies needed to be dedicated to war efforts. Women around this time were not thought of as equals, and she battled every day for her voice to be heard. And this is why writing was so important, because they were words on paper, not just a face. Rachel's passion for nature. As mentioned before, Rachel's mother was her biggest influence for her love of writing and nature. They used to walk through the woods and do school through a nature-based course of education. Rachel found through college some of her biggest influences as well. Her good friend Mary Skinner was the reason that she changed her majors from English to biology. As she continued to work, she continued to find that it was mankind's hand that has directly changed the environment and the ecosystem of the earth. This is what fuels Rachel to continue to write and let people know what is happening. The great feedback that she receives from her work helps fuel and feed her drive to work on raising awareness of what is happening to the environment. When Rachel received a letter from Olga Owens Hutchins, she was inspired to look further into the damage that was chemical DDT was doing to the ecosystem and inspired her to write Silent Spring. How Rachel overcame adversity during her time. I've said it before, but it was hard for women to be looked at as equals during this time period, when Rachel was doing some of her best work. How she overcame some of this was a support network of other women, groups, and publishing companies. Audubon Society, which works on preservations for birds, backed up Rachel because of the work she was doing. A lot of other backing also came from big groups as well, such as the Sierra Club, Wilderness Society, National Women's and Gardens Club. They all believed that Rachel was doing was for the greater good of the community, so they helped her make her voice heard through public speaking and advertising through her writing. She also fell ill to health multiple times in the early 1950s, is where she had a tumor removed from her breast, which further led to her having a mastectomy in 1960. She continued to research and write because she knew if she didn't, then no one would speak for Mother Nature. Rachel's final outcome. As with Rachel, her final outcome was her writing. Her last book, Silent Spring, is also her most recognized piece of writing, which is still held in high regards today. Rachel had a gift, and that was through her writing. She was able to translate her work in the fields and out in the ecosystem and put it to where your average daily reader could comprehend the significance of that research that most biologists were doing out in the fields. She was also an inspiration to many of things, most of all to women and protecting our planet. I would call her the mother of environmentalism. She is well known for her writing and her books, but you have to realize that this comes from years of traveling and research and collecting data, talking to other chemists and biologists, and finding the solutions to the underlying problems that everyday people might not take notice. The backwork of her writing is what might be one of the most overlooked attributes to public health. What Rachel was able to do was to get people talking and asking more questions about what exactly was going on. She raised awareness for the voiceless and let it be known that the way Americans were living their life was not just hurting the environment, but it was also hurting their own lives. In her book, Silent Spring, she writes, "But man is part of nature, and this war against nature is inevitably a war against himself." Now people started questioning the government, looking for answers on what has claimed to be safe, but looks to be destroying the life and the ecosystems around them. It made the government start to restructure and do more research as well to what was going on in the ecosystems, because they had no answers to the questions that were being asked. Rachel's contributions directly changed the 60s. So Rachel's book, Silent Spring, started what is called the snowball effect. As I mentioned, it got people talking and asking their government what was going on. After World War II, there wasn't that much regulation really on products, since they were in a time of producing new effective products and then using it. Most things, if they worked, there wasn't much pushback because it was seen as an effective product. And during wartime efforts, they needed things as fast as possible. So a lot of extra measures and testing really didn't get done because they got an effective product. Example of this is thalidomide was blocked by Frances Kelly because she did research that showed in Canada and Europe this product had a direct relation to fetal birth defects. People in the early 60s were looking for governmental change, and they succeeded with a newly elected president, JFK. JFK even talked about Silent Spring on national television, stating that the government will address the effects of DDT. Rachel's contributions also changed history. So the list goes on for what happened after Silent Spring came out. It started the ripple effect that lasted for many years until the government finally did something to calm the choppy waters. Public safety and the threat of our ecosystem started to become a big concern. In 1963, the Clean Air Act was passed, which provided funds and research to air pollution. Following that, in 1966, the Endangered Species Act was passed, and it had federal involvement to save habitats of species and identify species that could be endangered. Continuing on, in 1967, the Environmental Defense Fund was established, and they took Rachel Carson's research to further develop how DDT affected the eggshells of birds, making the shells too thin to form life. Even though it took 10 years after Silent Spring, DDT was finally banned in America, although they could still manufacture for shipment outside of the U.S. Greenpeace was established in 1969 to continue to protect and make our ecosystems healthy and robust. Continuing on, in April 22nd, 1970, Earth Day was established so everyone could take notice of the planet and try to make a difference in protecting the ecosystem. Finally, the government established the Environmental Protection Agency. It was established to protect human life and the environment by putting laws into established regulations that our Congress passes. Although Rachel died in 1964, she was able to see some of the changes coming through the government. Rachel still continues to have an impact on the present. Kelly McMasters wrote on Rachel and how she helped her through a struggling time by reciting some of Rachel's quotes like, "Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as our life lasts." Again, it was Rachel's way of writing, where she was able to capture the heart of the reader and bring them into such a simple place where they could relate our mind and our body back to nature. As long as there is someone fighting to protect the environment, or a reader turning the page about environmental changes, we will always be able to thank and reflect on Rachel Carson. Today, Earth Day is celebrated around the world on April 22nd in 193 countries. While Rachel might not have directly pushed for there to be this day of recognition, she raised enough awareness in other people that fought and continued to push for a difference through her words of inspiration. Rachel's work is still relevant. Of course her work is still relevant today. She is studied and her pieces of work are read in classrooms to teach others how one voice can make a difference. She challenged her own government to make change, wake up, and notice what is happening. She realized that one voice against someone so big is not enough, but if you continue to voice the wrongs to others, you start a movement. Where are we now, 52 years later after her death? Well, millions of people fight for change in regulations to lower our carbon footprint. All of the agencies that are established within the first decade after Silent Spring are some of the most vital resources to protecting human and environmental life from ourselves. While our Earth is in a lot worse shape than when Rachel was alive, 17% of the Amazon forest have been lost within the last 50 years. Her words still rustle through the leaves when the wind blows and people fight to protect more acreage from development. I myself have come to realize through my studies of Rachel that she has lit the fire in me. I will now commit more.